Thank you for staying. Recently, Oppo has unveiled its latest flagship, the Find X9 Pro in Barcelona. But what does it tell us about the state of smartphone innovation today? Joining us to break down the trends is independent tech reviewer KIRILL KORBOUT. Right, KIRILL, what were your first impressions of the Find X9 Pro and how does it fit into the broader smartphone landscape right now?
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I think this new phone is kind of the pinnacle, the epitome of what a smartphone could be. In 2025, I think this is the best of the best. We're looking at a phone that has no downsides, really. Maybe the only downside you have is that you cannot really own it because, there's so many choices and most people stick to a brand. So we have seen that in the US, most of the users actually sticks with iPhones. So it's about 80% of the whole landscape is just iPhones, right? So for a company from China like Oppo, which are number 4 in the internal China sales list, they really have to come up with something truly groundbreaking. So we're looking at a flagship phone that excels in every aspect. We're talking about great battery, great cameras, great screens, pretty much the full Android experience with some AI baked into it for these modern ways to use phones and whatnot. But we're looking at very fierce competition at the moment. So even if you have the best hardware, it does not necessarily guarantee you a first place ranking in any of the markets because we're looking at the Chinese market. They're still going for something more of a mid-ranger. Asian market, Southeast Asian market is also something of a budget mid-ranger, right? Europe is more into high-level phones, but not the flagship. So we're talking about top tier, maybe an iPhone 17. Whereby the US, which is one of the bigger markets, we are talking about true flagships. So even though that Oppo has a really strong contender this year, we're still not so clear in terms of how well it will do. But for a lot of these phone makers, the flagship represents sort of an R&D department where you throw a lot of things at it. You make them as good as you possibly can, and you let them trickle down into other budget segments, whereby you then start to optimize and make them more affordable and available to other users in other price segments. So what we're looking at is probably the peak of technology at the moment right now from Oppo. And if I could, if Oppo would be very glad, very nice and send me this phone, I'll be more than welcome to accept it. Yeah.
Well, I'm hoping they'll send me one too. Now, the Find X series has traditionally been marketed as a camera-focused line. From your perspective, KIRILL, as a reviewer, what do consumers actually expect now from a camera phone, in 2025 and 2026, moving on?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's so many camera phones, right? On each phone now has 3 lenses at the back, maybe 1 or 2 in the front. So we're looking at very versatile camera setups. We remember just maybe about 6, 7, 8 years ago, we were still using only 1 camera, right? And then it became 2, and it became 3, and then became more sophisticated. Now we're talking about phones that have the camera sensors equivalent of a small camera that we used to carry around in our pocket, but it's all replaced by the camera phones now. And of course, we all know this, but at the same time, what you're looking at with the Oppo Find X9 series, that it really excels at this photography. For people who are looking for everyday, day-to-day photography, I think if you buy any of the flagships, you're pretty much doing pretty well, right? So it's just a matter of price. And I think that's the first thing that people look at is basically how expensive is it? Because some of these foldable phones or the high-end phones, they're becoming very prohibitive in terms of pricing right now. We remember a time where we could probably spend like 2,000 ringgit on a flagship phone. Those times are behind us. So we're now looking at an Oppo phone which retails now for about 5,000 ringgit. And you're looking at iPhone 17 Pros that are now up into the echelons of 7,000, 8,000 ringgit for just a phone, right? So you have to ask yourself, how much am I willing to put on a phone in terms of money, and how fast will it depreciate? Because if you're buying iPhones or Apple products in general, they tend to stay with their price for a longer period of time because they have OS, operating system updates for about 6 to 7 years, so you can still use it for a very long time. However, on Android, we're starting to see this trend catch up where we are promised about at least 4 generations of updates, some of them stretching up to 6 as well, just to match Apple. So in my opinion, it's the price point, it's the availability of the phone for a longer period of time. Camera features, of course, being a very strong contender up there, but again, you have to look at your own gallery and see how many photos do you take with the wide angle. right? And say,
Right.
oh, my phone is great, but then I never use it. So it's kind of like besides the point, right? So I think the innovation in the features that we saw from the iPhone, where we have a square sensor that can take both wide and tall selfies, that's going to come in and trickle down into almost every phone. So the problem with buying a phone nowadays is that in 6 months, it's going to be something else better around the corner, right? So like, are you going to bet on this particular phone, or do you still want to hold your cards and wait until a better one shows up? And I think, to be honest, Oppo's still done a really good job here, because it's, in terms of hardware, you can't really beat it right now. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about AI in smartphones these days. Now, most brands running on the Android OS, including Oppo, are now heavily integrated with Google's software and also AI frameworks. Now, how does this influence the user experience? Does it make it harder for brands to stand out?
Yeah, AI becomes the new battlefield, right? When the hardware is becoming so good. And if you look at the hardware, generally it's the same processor from the same manufacturer, and it's the same camera sensors from almost the same manufacturer. So they have to come in and compete and just kind of fight for the users on different levels. So we're seeing that in China, for example, we have the iPhone is basically the only phone out of China that is still competing. It's in third place right now this year. The sales are, going up for the local brands, and Vivo is the one that is ahead now. And why are they ahead? Because they're very user-centric. So what the users want, they usually give it to them. And they were also camera-centric as well. So Oppo is finding itself in a territory which has been traditionally dominated by other brands. So if you're looking at AI as a standout feature, it's not like something that is unique to this particular phone, because we're looking at manufacturers are trying to implement their own things, but AI is so data-centric reliant that you need big data centers to drive this. And most of these brands, what they do is they just kind of repackage services that are based on the Google Gemini AI platform. And even the Apple AI, which has been delayed for quite some time now, there's a backstory which might not be open to the public, but I think what they're doing is basically rebranding Google as well. So it'd be known as Apple AI, but in reality, it's still just Google. So if you look, buying a phone, sometimes in 25, 26, you will see AI features, but most of the time it will just be the same thing. So basically, how can I use a feature that I've had for 6, 7 years, which is, for example, keyboard predictive writing, right? We've had that for some time. Now it's being packaged as AI. You can elaborate more. Or for example, in photo enhancements, we've been enhancing photos for a very long time now, but it becomes now this kind of gimmick, right? So if you remember some time back, we had this VR, virtual reality goggles they were trying to sell us and say like, look, everything is going to be all about VR. And that trend never really caught on, right? So AI could be one of those features that they're just trying to see what sticks. Basically throw everything at the user and see what in actuality they're going to be implementing in their day-to-day interaction with the phone. So we're seeing the early stages of AI where the manufacturers are still experimenting with their users in a way to see which direction are we going to go. So right now, if you're buying a phone, you see there'll be like 10 different things with AI, and we have no idea how to use it actually, because at the end of the day, we just want to scroll the news, reply on WhatsApp messages, take some pictures, and that's pretty much it. But they're giving us this big package of software and say like, look, figure it out. It's like, and it's a bit scary and kind of intimidating at times, I would say.
Right, because for the majority of us, we are just average smartphone users. That's what we want to do is, being able to use a phone that's user-friendly. Now, with all of these trends in mind, where do you see the smartphone market heading over the next year or so? And what do you think will matter most to users? And what really should brands be focusing on, besides a good camera, besides AI?
Yeah, if you remember the days of the laptop, right? Nobody ever thinks of what the laptop is built of nowadays. There used to be a time where we're talking about this got the latest chip, the biggest screen, this and that. And nowadays it just kind of plateaued, meaning to say, okay, I'm buying a laptop 2025. I know it's good enough to do stuff, right? And that's where it's come. So the conversation is no longer on the hardware. That means a general user does not have to go into the store and say like, I want this amount of RAM, this amount of processing, this, like basically the chips are strong enough for the average user to do what they need to do. Smartphones now are so ubiquitous and everywhere that they also can do pretty much anything. If you pick up a phone, you go to a store, you can pick up a good phone for about 300 ringgit. It's pretty amazing what it can do actually. So if we're looking at where the technology is going to be going, that's where you're going to look into the flagships, because the general features that trickle down to the budget segment is basically what's left over from the experimentation. So when we're seeing that, the flagships are moving in a direction where we're talking about foldable phones, right? We're talking about curved screens. We're talking about augmented reality or whatnot. So we saw that curved screens came and they went. Now in 2025, most of the flagships are now flat. So experimentation time is over because users found it to be easier to apply a screen protector on a flat screen instead of having to go and spend a lot of money on something that is very hard to find and expensive, right? So we're looking at AI is something that I think is, it's telling us that the phones are now ready to leave the hardware competition segment and focus more on the software, which means user experience. One thing that I kind of realized when just even thinking about this question beforehand was that, in a way, what's happening now is we are now forced to not just scroll. Like, a lot of times if you look at your own screen time, you're just scrolling at night and looking at the news or just checking messages or whatnot. So right now, AI is helping you to become a creator. So previously, we're just consumers of information, right? But what AI wants us to do is become creators with the click of a button. So we're still scrolling, we're still only pushing the screen once, maybe even saying something small or just chatting a little bit, and then it expands on that. So we become these kind of, think of it as a exoskeleton, right? AI is an extension of ourselves, whereby we want to do a little thing, we tell it what to do, and it creates this whole story around us, right? So we look like we're creators, but in reality, we're not. We're still consumers. And I think that's kind of a danger for the general user to say, like, look, I'm going to start relying on AI for everything. That means even if I want to write someone a message, I can't do it on my own. I need someone to assist me. And I think that's a little bit of a danger, So we can see that the trends are going somewhere because AI at this moment is very profitable. If you're looking at the phone manufacturers as companies, and they also have, shareholders, and they have these board of directors or whatnot, and they want their company to go up in stock. And that usually represents by what does the market feel about this company. And if they are very well invested in something that is novel at the moment and is kind of the buzzword, which is AI, and if we have that in our presentations, even if the consumers don't necessarily implement it or deal with it or use it, it creates this perception of the company to be innovative and future-proof or whatnot, and that helps it to grow in terms of shares and stocks, right? So sometimes we see all these actions and all these marketing ploys are not necessarily for the consumer, but more for the brand to compete with others and be strong in a battlefield, basically, because that's what it is. If you're looking at how cutthroat this market is, for a person to switch brands is actually very tough. Like, one of the biggest hurdles for all these manufacturers is once you've stuck with a brand for a very long time, it's very hard to switch. Like, unless something really happens, like when I've been a Samsung user for a very long time, and my phone exploded. But do you remember the times when there was a Samsung Note 7, it started to explode, and I had to actually give it back, and I was like, should I consider switching? But this is quite rare, but extreme case, meaning to say, unless something extreme happens, most people don't switch. So if you've been an iPhone user for 15 years, there's no phone that's going to come around the corner and say, look, you have to have this. This is so much better than the iPhone. Most people don't care.
And that's true. I've been an iPhone user for years, and I haven't thought of switching. Anyhow, Kirill, this conversation can go on for a lot longer. However, we are short on time. Thank you so much for helping us make sense of where smartphones are heading and what consumers actually value in 2025. And we hope we get to speak to you again very, very soon. Thanks so much, Kirill.
Hope so too. Thank you very much.